With the success of one of my earlier videos where I talked about the de Havilland Comet, I've decided to talk about some of the other British jets. If you guys didn't know, before the 1980s, the British aerospace industry was actually the second most advanced in the world, right behind the Americans like Boeing and Douglas. And the British actually built some really impressive airplanes, so I decided to start a short video series where I talk about some of these legends. Originally, I was gonna do a lot of them in one video, but after looking at it, I've decided to space them out. But in this video, we're gonna focus on the BAC111. And with that in mind, I guess the Comet video was the first episode, so welcome to episode 2 of The Forgotten Realm of the British Aerospace Industry. Enjoy! In the 1960s, competition in the aerospace industry was fierce, especially with the introduction of the 707 and DC-8 just a few years earlier. Many manufacturers were trying to jump into the jet age. Along with the 707 and DC-8, other planes in development at the time included the Convair 880, the Boeing 727, the Boeing 737, the Soot Aviation Caravelle, which actually had its first flight before the 707 and DC-8, the Douglas DC-9, the Vickers VC-10, the Hawker Siddeley Trident, and of course the BAC111. Development for the plane began in the mid-1950s, where BEA wanted a jet-powered plane that could work alongside their propeller-driven aircraft such as the Vickers Viscount, and Hunting Aircraft became one of the first manufacturers to work on that plane, coming up with a 30-seater jet-powered airplane called the Hunting 107. Then in the 60s, due to government pressure, they merged with several other British aircraft manufacturers to form BAC, the British Aircraft Corporation, and the new company decided that Hunting Aircraft's original design had huge potential, but the market research decided that a 30-seater airplane was too small. So they increased capacity to 59 seats before landing at about 80 seats, and the plane was called the BAC111. The Hawker Siddeley Trident was built to cater towards BEA's needs, while the BAC111 was built to cater towards airlines from around the world. The plane then had its first flight on the 20th of August 1963, beating out the DC-9 by almost 2 years. And this plane was built to be an extremely tough and reliable workhorse, capable of handling many cycles in a single day. It was literally known as the bus of the skies. Along with this, several more variants of the plane came out. The 200, the original version, the 300 with more powerful engines and bigger fuel tanks, the 400, which was basically just the 300 with features catered more towards the American market, and the 500, which was longer, had a capacity of 119 people, and more powerful engines. But there was a problem with this one, which I'll talk about later. All of this resulted in a lot of interest from airlines when it first came out, especially because since the DC-9 wasn't ready yet, your only option really was the BAC111 and maybe the 737. So airlines were quick to order these. But there was one hidden flaw with this airplane that ultimately led to major changes to the future development of all airplanes, especially those with T-tailed designs. A T-tail airplane is a plane that has its horizontal stabilizers placed on top of the tail fin. And on the 22nd of October 1963, just 2 months after its first flight, BAC was performing a stall test with the aircraft, which is to test how the aircraft will recover from a stall. But the pilots couldn't recover from it, and the plane ended up crashing, killing all 7 people on board. And that's when they discovered a phenomenon called a deep stall or a super stall. When a plane flies, its wings generate lift, but the slower a plane flies, the less lift is generated by the wings. And if the plane flies too slow, the lift generated by the wings isn't enough to keep the plane in the air, and hence the plane drops. This is what we call a stall. And if you want to fly a plane higher, you need more lift under the wings. So when you pitch the plane's nose up, you also have to ensure there's still enough lift under the wings, so you have to make sure that the plane is flying fast enough. And once again, if the plane is too slow, there's not enough lift under the wings, and hence the plane will stall and drop, but not necessarily with the nose pointed down. And that's what makes a stall so dangerous for an airplane, because it disrupts the airflow around the various flight controls. Your flight controls and engines are designed to work with the plane going forwards. Your engines, for example, are parallel to the direction of travel. That way, as the plane moves forwards, air is automatically forced into the engines, allowing them to operate. And the same idea with the other flight controls. They're all designed to work with the aircraft going forwards. But when an aircraft stalls and starts dropping from the sky, the airflow is no longer parallel to the aircraft. In fact, it's more perpendicular depending on how bad the stall is. This means that the flight controls and engines can no longer operate in the way they were designed to do. So, the standard procedure to recover the plane is not by increasing engine power, because as I talked about in my 737 MAX video, if the engines are slung underneath the wings, it'll cause the plane's nose to pitch up higher, worsening the stall. And at the same time, since the engines aren't facing forwards anymore, anymore, the air isn't flowing directly into the engines. So if you try to increase power now, there will be too much fuel and not enough oxygen, causing the engines to backfire and flame out. So the proper procedure to recover is to push the control columns forward and hope to God that there's enough altitude and airflow over the flight controls to recover the plane. The problem is that for T-tailed aircraft in particular, there's an added danger. As the plane falls, the wings act as a big wall, blocking the airflow on top of the wings as the plane falls. And since the elevators and horizontal stabilizers are placed high above, there's a strong possibility that those two critical components to recover from the stall are placed directly in the path of the disrupted air caused by the wings. This makes it even harder to recover the plane if it stalls, and this is what we call a deep stall or super stall, and this is what led to the test flight crash on the 22nd of October 1963, and it led to the development of brand new stall protection systems for all airplanes. Stick shakers and stick pushers were added to these planes. When the plane was about to stall, so it hasn't stalled yet, the control columns would vibrate, telling the pilots the plane was dangerously slow. Again, at this point the plane hasn't stalled yet, so the airflow around the plane is still at a manageable level and will allow for a quick and easy recovery. Additionally, especially on T-tailed aircraft, stick pushers were also added, which is when the aircraft would push the nose down by itself to protect it from stalls. So all T-tailed airplanes that followed had these systems installed. And a while back I was listening to a bunch of stall alarms, and did you know that the BAC111 and the Hawker Siddeley Trident share the same stall alarm? And it is by far one of the scariest stall alarms I've ever heard. Take a listen. Yeah, so if I ever fly a Hawker Siddeley Trident or a BAC111, I'm gonna make sure that the flaps are fully extended and fly at max speed throughout the whole flight. Anyways, once those changes were put in place, the BAC111 was then certified and put into service. It sold very well in the US market, which was a fantastic performance by a foreign aircraft, but the plane wasn't without its flaws. The plane may have been extremely robust, tough and reliable, but it was also very loud and noisy. It was about as refined as a bus. In fact, there's this Reddit post here and half the comments are talking about how loud the plane was. So in the 60s and 70s when the plane came out, this wasn't a major problem because at the time, that was about as refined as any jet-powered plane was going to get. And the subsequent DC-9s and 737s were probably just as bad, but problems with the BAC-111 started around 1967 when the BAC-111 500 was supposed to release. Again, the 500 was supposed to be a stretched version of the original plane, and it was supposed to be released in 1966, but local airline BEA couldn't finalize their requirements for the 500, hence the project was delayed for a year. So now, instead of the BAC-111 having an advantage of being a year early to the US markets, it was now a year behind the 737 and DC-9. And this delay gave Boeing and Douglas the opportunity to sell the DC-9s and 737 to dominate the market that the BAC-111 was supposed to fill. Additionally, the DC-9 was cheaper to buy, offered more seating, and shared the same engines with the 727, so spare parts were easier to come by and store. This greatly hurt the sales of the plane, but the biggest problem with the plane came around in the 1980s. The plane was loud and noise regulations were getting stricter, so BAC had to adapt. Obviously, the noise mostly came from the engines, so BAC proposed the idea for a BAC-111-700. This version of the plane would have been even bigger, holding 134 people, which was about the same size as the updated 737s and DC-9s, while also having more powerful, quieter engines, but several problems emerged. The main thing being, they couldn't find an engine to power the plane. Being a British jet, the main choice for engines were from Rolls-Royce, but at the time, Rolls-Royce was facing bankruptcy, so those engines were never made. At the same time, the plane was already 20 years old, and since it only sold about 200 units versus the probably 500 or more 737s and DC-9s, no company wanted to make updated engines for the plane. In the end, the BAC-111-700 never materialized, so instead, they developed hush kits for the existing BAC-111-500s as well as any 111-500s that would soon be produced. The idea was this would help to soften the sounds of the engines, but even with these kits, the airplane was still very loud, and to make matters worse, the hush kits also made the planes less efficient. They also proposed the idea for a BAC-111-800, which would use the CFM56 engines, the same engines used in the 737 Classic, while also stretching the plane to make it seat 150 passengers. But this project was also eventually abandoned because BAC and Hawker Siddeley merged together, and together they tried to develop a plane called the X11. This would have been an even larger plane, seating up to 160 people, but ultimately it never materialized. Airbus because at this point, the company had a choice. They could either develop the X-11 on their own or join forces with Airbus to develop a brand new airplane. And they went with the second option, creating the now highly successful A320, which was the final nail in the coffin for the BAC111 project. And from the late 70s and onwards, as the orders for the jet began to dwindle, production moved from the UK to Romania, where the last BAC111 was built in 1989, signaling the end of a 26-year run with 244 units built. And eventually, the last BAC111 was retired not too long ago in 2019, marking the end of a 56-year journey. The BAC111 story may have been short-lived, but it inspired many of the safety features and expectations we have of aircraft today. The stick shaker, the stick pusher, and the demand for robust, reliable workhorses. It all started from this legendary British jet. And the strength of the BAC111 was truly put to the test on the 10th of June 1990 as British Airways Flight 5390. The plane took off from Birmingham, and halfway through the flight, due to improper maintenance, part of the cockpit window blew out. The resulting depressurization caused the captain to get sucked out of the aircraft, but he still managed to cling on. After a brutal fight to the ground, the first officer managed to land the plane, saving all 87 people on board. The captain made a full recovery, and the aircraft was then repaired, put back into service, and it was eventually scrapped in 2006. The BAC111 is truly a forgotten workhorse, and I didn't know much about this plane until I made this video. Stay tuned for the sad story of the Hawker Siddeley Trident. These jet-powered planes are cool, but we need something smaller. There we go, the BAC111. How did you build that so fast? We still gotta test it. We're stalling! Okay, we gotta fix that, and I will do the same. Presenting our BAC111. This is wonderful! Dude, I haven't finished my DC-9 yet! We also have this one coming soon. Now that's the one I want. Come on, BAA, we need to finalize this and get building. I just don't know what I want. Almost done with our plane. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on! Okay, here. Sorry for the delay, but here is our better airplane. Oh, sorry, we went with this already. All these planes here are too loud. Okay, we'll upgrade our plane with this. We just need to find engines for it. Rolls-Royce. I don't even have money to eat. Don't ask me to make engines for you. Other manufacturers. Your plane is already 20 years old and you only sold 200 units. What money can I make from that? It's okay. Let's get together and make this.